Hi, so my name's Francesco Renzi. I'm the CEO of Superfluid. We're a company building DeFi protocol on Ethereum. We're currently not live, and there's very little information about us out there intentionally. We'll be going live very soon, and then you'll be able to find out more about us. But today, I actually would like to talk about something else. So just a topic which fascinates me. Very kind of technical, but I'm trying to condense it into few words and without going too much into technicalities, but I hope it'll be interesting to everyone. So I'm going to talk about atomic batched calls. So should I just go forward and start?
Yeah, so if you have some presentation, you can share the screen also.
Sure, I'll share my screen. There we go. Okay, so batched atomic calls, Ethereum's secret power. So what are batched atomic calls? So first of all, let's talk about atomic transactions in general. So atomic transactions are when we do a transaction and it either happens or it doesn't. This is something, it's called atomic because the atom is the smallest element and it's indivisible, right? So the whole transaction is indivisible. It either all happens or it fails completely. So in this example, we have Bob, the farmer, who is sending Alice 100 yams, and Alice is sending Bob 300 pickles in exchange. So very stupid example, but it's, let's say, the nature of commerce, right? One party sending one item, the other party selling something else. This could be commodities, but it could also be money or financial instruments of whatever kind. So all commerce is based on this. And in the traditional world, what would happen is you would have Bob sending Alice the good. And if they meet in person, maybe they can exchange a product in real time. But if it's done through time, maybe Bob has to ship the yams to Alice. He doesn't really know if Alice is going to send the items back, right? There's always this element of delays, an element of trust. Bob has to trust that Alice will send back the goods. Bob has to trust that Alice will send back exactly the right amounts and the right quality of goods, right? And there's always this risk. There's always this trust. And this risk and this trust create costs and create opportunities for obviously scams, for bad things to happen, right? But on the blockchain, we are able to ensure that if Bob sends Alice 100 yams and Alice sends back to Bob 300 pickles, the transaction happens. If any of those elements is not exactly like this, the transaction fails. So this in itself is a great blockchain innovation. It's something that couldn't really be done before. You always had to trust an intermediary who would make sure the whole thing happened, right? The fact that this is now possible to do has enabled all sorts of things, right? We have on-chain trade. We have people exchanging, Ethereum for Bitcoin, Bitcoin for DAI, for stable coins, for all sorts of assets on chain in this atomic way. But as everything else in the blockchain space, we like to push things further, right? It's not just about exchanging one thing for another thing. We want to make more complex exchanges. So that's what a batched atomic transaction is. So a batched atomic transaction is not just one thing for another, it's a series of operations. So any number of operations in a sequence executed through the blockchain and all or nothing execution. So if any of these fails, the whole transaction fails. So let's go back to our example. We have Bob sending yams to Alice, Alice sending pickles back to Bob, and then Bob sending these pickles to Carol, who is giving back sushi to Bob. So Bob doesn't want the pickles, he only wants the sushi. So if the transaction with Carol, for whatever reason, can't go through, maybe Carol doesn't have enough sushi to send back to Bob, then Bob doesn't want to stand with the pickles, he wants the sushi. So he will make the whole transaction fail. And this is basically what an atomic transaction does. So the fact that it's batched is very interesting, not for this specific example, obviously, which is very basic, but for the fact that here we have 2 operations, but we could have 50 operations, right? And the more complexity we add, the more opportunities we have. And it doesn't have to be necessarily yams, pickles, or sushi, even though these are all real tokens on Ethereum, which are traded right now. I'm not going to go into this, but if you've been following Ethereum, you know that these tokens are out there and they have real economic value. But there's a lot more that can be done, right? So let's imagine a complex trade like this without batched atomic calls, right? So every interaction is independent. Each interaction is done in a sequence, right? One transaction at a time. If one of them doesn't go through, you're stuck in an intermediate state. So in the example before, Bob would be stuck with pickles. Each market is in constant motion. So the price of an item could change while you're executing the list of transactions. And in any case, traditional markets, often the liquidity is siloed, right? So if you have things on different exchanges, you have to move from one exchange to the other with a delay, and that could, again, change market conditions. Some transactions could fail, and the whole thing could be stuck in an intermediate state. Differently with batched atomic calls, we chain together all the transactions. Any error in the chain of transactions will void the entire call. The entire blockchain is yours while you execute the trade, which means that nobody else can change any piece of information, right? This is key because the price of an item is the same when you start and when you finish your batch call. And this means it's a lot more predictable, right? You can predict the whole thing before you execute it. You can run it off chain, see if it will work, and then run it on chain. You can execute the whole thing, and you know that nothing can go wrong, right? If nothing can go wrong, the risks are lower. If the risks are lower, the prices are lower, the margins you need are lower, and you can do more interesting things and more complex things. So again, you can also interact with every part of the DeFi ecosystem, which if you've been following Ethereum, you will know that there's new products every week being launched, new primitives, options, futures. It's all coming every week. There's more things, and you can create complex interactions across all of these different financial products. So if you have advantages, there's no risks, right? Or at least the risks are extremely reduced. This means you never get stuck in an intermediate state with pickles in your hand. There's a lot lower risk, and this means there's lower costs, right? Because you don't have to account for the possibility of failure anymore. Predictable execution of trades means you can operate on lower margins. It means you can take chances, even though margins are very small, because you know that that margin, as much as it's small, has a very low risk on it, right? In a traditional market, if you see a potential arbitrage opportunity, but you don't have 100% certainty that it will go through, if it's too small, maybe you won't take it. In DeFi, you take every opportunity because every piece of profit without risk is profit, because the risk is much lower. This also lowers the opportunity cost because basically the only thing you can lose if the transaction fails is the gas. So if the gas cost is low enough, obviously this is not the case currently in Ethereum, that's a different subject. But again, the only thing you can lose is the gas, so you don't risk the capital that's involved in the transactions. And that's the big issue here. Another very interesting thing, which is allowed because of batch calls, right? Remember, it's all or nothing, right? If it doesn't go through until the end, as instructed, it fails. And one thing that's possible are flash loans. Flash loans are very interesting. I'm pretty sure most of you have read at least one news article mentioning them because there's been a lot of things happening with flash loans. But basically, I'm going to try and summarize them for whoever has not heard of them. So flash loans are a way of taking out a loan with infinite liquidity. Okay, so here we're talking about being able to borrow $1 million immediately, $2 million, $10 million, no limits. You can borrow any amount with no collateral. There's no collateral you have to post to take this loan. You just take it with no identity. We're talking about Ethereum blockchain, right? So you don't have to say who you are. There's no KYC. You just take a massive loan with no collateral. It has no cost, or in some cases with some platforms, it has a very small cost. But in any case, no opportunity, no cost beyond the gas if the transaction fails, right? And if you give the money back At the end of the transaction, then it goes through. If you don't give the money back, because for whatever reason your transaction can't afford to give the money back at the end, the whole transaction fails and the lender has no risk at all. So for the lender, this is amazing because they have no risk. They're giving you money, but they're not losing anything because there's no way for you to steal the money. If your transaction doesn't give the money back, the whole thing fails and you lost your gas that you spent for the transaction. So this obviously it's quite exciting, right? But let's go through an example, right, of how this can be used for something tangible and real on the blockchain right now. So I don't know if you know Compound, it's a platform for lending, right? So people put up collateral and they borrow other assets. So let's say, for example, I've lent 10 Ether on Compound. I've taken a loan of 1,500 DAI and I'm paying 10% interest a year. So now it's good, it's great. I've spent the 1,500 DAI because I needed to pay my mortgage. And now what happened is I see on Aave, the interest rate is only 4%. So now I'd love to switch, right? I can save 6% a year on interest rate. This is amazing. The problem is I already paid the 1,500, right? So there's no way for me to unlock those 10 Ether. So the way you would do this probably in a traditional setting is the two banks would have some kind of agreement and you would be able to refinance the loan. You'd probably go to the bank, arrange something, and maybe after a while they'd move the loan for you. But let's see how we solve this problem without any intermediaries using flash loans. So the first thing you would do is you would take a $1,500 DAI flash loan. You would pay back the debt in Compound. This frees out the collateral so you can take back the 10 Ether, deposit the 10 Ether into Aave, borrow 1,500 DAI back, pay back the flash loan, and now enjoy the cheaper rate offered on Aave, right? So no capital is required on your part to refinance your loan in one transaction on Ethereum. Now, again, you can do this in traditional finance, but again, you require intermediaries and it requires time and it requires agreements between the banks or the financial institutions involved. Here, there's no deal between them. There's no third parties involved. This is all programmatically organized, right? And why this is interesting is not simply because you're refinancing a loan, right? It's because you're refinancing the loan through one transaction. What this means is that if you're managing enough money, you could potentially do this every time there is a difference in APR between two providers. You could do this potentially multiple times a day. You could do this every 15 seconds. Every block on Ethereum, you could be changing provider. And that, I'm afraid, is simply not very likely to happen with traditional banks anytime soon. And definitely not with no capital, no costs, and from your living room. But anyways, so this is one use case, which in my opinion makes a lot of sense and is relatable. But now I'd like to talk to you about something else that happened this year. This is an exploit. So I'm not using the word hack because nothing was broken per se. They didn't find a bug. They exploited a design flaw, which is different in my opinion. So BZX, if you've never heard of it, it's a platform very similar to Compound. So they also give loans in front of collateral. So users provide collateral and they take out loans. So the interesting thing with BZX and the design flaw in this case is that the price information, so in order to know how much you can borrow based on your collateral, this information was provided by an on-chain oracle. So they were getting information from Uniswap and Kyber exchange. So these are two exchanges on Ethereum. And they were taking the price as a spot price, right? So they were taking the price at a specific point in time and using that to calculate how much they could lend to users. And this was their mistake. Now, I'll explain what happened, but just to give you an idea, the exploiter ran away with $500,000 worth of Ether. So let's go through the attack. So first of all, we have our hacker, anonymous hacker. Nobody knows who he is. So what he does is he borrows 7,500 Ether through a flash loan from DYDX. So 7,500 Ether. At the time, the price was just under $300. So it's almost $3 million that he just took, again, anonymously with no collateral. He just took this flash loan. Second thing he does is he starts buying SUSD. So SUSD is a currency which is very close to the dollar, and it's quite liquid. So there were a lot of opportunities for him to buy it on chain. So first of all, with 3,500 ETH, he buys 1 million SUSD. As you can see, at the moment, the price of Ether is still quite stable at 284 USD per Ether. This is still the correct price. Now, the next thing they do is they start doing a lot of small orders on chain. They did 20 orders to Kyber Swap for 20 ETH each. So each one of these orders, you can see all of this on the blockchain. Each one of these orders pushes up the price of SUSD on Kyber Swap, right? And through these orders, they basically drain all the liquidity of SUSD on Kyber Swap. And at the same time, as you can see, it pushes up the Oracle. So the Oracle of BZX is now seeing 160 USD per Ether, right? What it's doing is basically pushing up the value of SUSD, pushing down the value of Ether, okay? So after draining completely the Kyber exchange, he uses another 540 Ether to buy 90,000 SUSD through Uniswap. So Kyber, when it's empty, uses Uniswap. So basically he drains Kyber and then he drains part of Uniswap, pushing the price further down to 111 SUSD for each Ether. Now, the price has changed. As you can see, he's got over 1 million SUSD. He's still got some Ether left, but that's a mistake, actually. He didn't need them. So with this million, he deposits all of it into BZX. So he deposits 1.15 million SUSD to BZX and uses them as collateral. So what this means is he's putting them there, and now he's going to borrow against that SUSD. But when BZX is, the smart contracts are trying to understand how much the hacker can borrow, what they do is they check the Oracle. And the Oracle is not giving the correct price, because the correct price is still in the real world, right? This is all in one instant on the blockchain. But in the real world, the price is still $284 per Ether, right? But on the blockchain, in this precise instant, it's 111. So what happens is the hacker is able to borrow 6,800 Ether, which is way more than he should be borrowing, because the real price would have allowed him to borrow maybe 2,000, right? So now he's borrowed 6,800 Ether, and obviously the exchange is not very happy. I was actually with one of their founders the day before and the day after, and I can tell you he was not very happy. So now that he's borrowed all of this, he just abandons the SUSD in the exchange. He pays back 7,500 Ether flash loan. So he took the flash loan at the beginning, he gives it back at the end, transaction successful, and he gets to basically keep all the rest. So the hacker walked away with 2,360 Ether, which was done with spending 0.42 Ether in gas, which is nothing. We're talking about what at the time it would have been maybe $100. Now it probably they would have to spend a lot more, but they're walking away with $500,000, right? So upfront capital not necessary. So again, he spent about $100 and made about 500 million. So batched atomic calls are powerful. They're very powerful. They allow us to do complex trades. They allow us to create use cases like flash loans, which enable even more complex trades, which enable very interesting ways of moving capital and doing financial products on Ethereum. And again, you can execute multiple operations. The execution is all or nothing, and this is super important. You can move across any DeFi protocol on Ethereum, and as much as it's a niche, it's growing very fast. liquidity is getting deeper. There's more and more products, and layer 2s are coming. Cross-chain execution is coming, and all of this will feed into the Ethereum ecosystem. So these kinds of financial opportunities will become more and more every time. Using flash loans, if nothing goes through, you lose nothing. So if transactions fail, you lose nothing. And that's the core of it. It allows us to exploit any anything that we see on the blockchain. There's an opportunity to make $10, you can make it, right? Because there's no risks. If it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through. There's no problem. You don't lose anything. And this is, in my opinion, extremely powerful, and it gives an edge to decentralized finance in general. We see a lot of speed of evolution of these kinds of complex transactions. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about miners who are starting to do these things themselves. So it's a very, very interesting topic. If anybody's interested in talking about this or anything else about DeFi, please follow me on Twitter, get in touch with me, and I always love talking about this stuff. There's been a lot of changes in the DeFi landscape, but so my company Superfluid is building some very, very cool stuff, which I'm not going to talk about today, but if you follow us on Twitter, you'll be one of the first people to find out when we launch in a few weeks. At the same time, I must say we are hiring. So if any of you guys wants to do really new and innovative stuff in finance on Ethereum, you should get in contact with us. What we're building is very innovative and completely breaks flash loans, by the way. So it'll be interesting to see what we can do there. But if anybody in the audience is interested, please get in touch with us.